Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking with Benji Hyam. So, Benji started his marketing career as an early stage, really as an early marketing hire at a few venture-backed startups, one of which was an app development agency where in his time there, and Benji might be able to get into this later, but during his time there, he grew their blog from basically what was nothing to their number one source of leads and client acquisition. And, since then, he's now gone on to start Grow and Convert, which is a done-for-you content marketing agency that, instead of focusing on vanity metrics like traffic growth, instead focuses primarily on increasing conversions and growing revenue for different companies. He's also the founder of Wordable, which was a WordPress plugin for turning Google Docs into WordPress posts that was acquired shortly after starting it. And, the real reason why I wanted to talk to Benji today is because, in a very short amount of time, he has, or what seems like a short amount of time, he has managed to become known as really one of the top content marketers in the industry and kind of a go-to source for expertise. And so what feels like a short amount of time may have been maybe a few years by now, but it felt like very quickly within a year, it's been a couple of years, it feels like, so that you've really been a top voice as a content marketer. And so what I want to dive into first is, and like I said, I don't want to spend too much time here because I know you've told the story a dozen times and people can go, and I'll link up places where people can hear the full story. But you got started with your partner Devesh over what was like an argument over dinner. Can you just give us like the 2-minute highlight version of how Grow and Convert became a business? So as beginner's luck would have it, the audio file for this first 15 minutes of this interview decided to get corrupted. And so luckily, most of the interview is still perfectly fine. We're going to get into that. But I had to kind of find a way to replace the first few minutes or so where Benji is introducing himself and how he got started with Grow and Convert. So I decided to pull in a clip from the next week's interview with Davish, where he kind of gives a little bit of insight into how things got started. And so that's going to be a couple minutes here. And so I'll roll right into that now.
In Grow and Convert, going back to mine, what happened was we started it not as an agency. It started from that. I don't know how much Benji told you on that, but in that dinner conversation, He was saying stuff about how content marketing works. And I basically was like, okay, then why don't you just start your own site, Benji? And if you know so much, he was like, I'm going to write a book. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. What's a book going to do for $19? What are you going to, if you know how to do this, this is extremely valuable. He basically was like, I know how to get B2B leads from content. And I was like, no, you don't. And then we were fighting that. And then he said, if you know how to do it, then start your own site and just show it, grow that site. And he was like, that's a really good idea. And then do what with it? I was like, I don't know, you could sell training, you could sell all kinds of stuff. And he was like, why don't you do it with me? And I was like, no. And then eventually I got roped into it. And so my joke has always been that this is supposed to be a side project, and now it's like this big thing. So because we started out that way, we basically started with nothing, like a blank domain authority 0, a new WordPress install. And we said, okay, we're going to start with a challenge. We're going to grow this site in 6 months to 40,000 visitors and a 5,000 person email list. And we're going to document everything we're doing in doing that. And that immediately showed differentiation. Now, at that time, the strategic differentiation was it was in early stages. We didn't have it. We were just starting, but I can go back now and in hindsight be like, oh, look, see, there's a seed of this thing that turned into that thing now. But at that time, it was at least we got the proof in. People were following it. There was some differentiation. There was a brand. These guys are literally documenting month over month traffic stuff, and we weren't succeeding. Yeah, we didn't make it, right? But because of that, we built another aspect of our brand that's hard to build. Or brand, what is brand? It's so nebulous. My current thinking of it is, it's the reputation of what people expect from your thing. It's what are the expectations? What do they know you for? And so the things you output say that, your content, the words, the podcast, the documents, the blog posts, the copy. And so what we had done at that point is created a brand of transparency and detail. Is that people knew when they came to Grow and Convert, we were going to show in gross detail everything we were doing. It also had a brand of analytics around content marketing. These things ended up becoming extremely useful and are still part of our brand now. We weren't geniuses. We didn't know that back then. We just thought that would be cool, right? So we had some intuition that would be differentiating. There was that intuition was there. And even if the little pieces are not there. So we started that way. Years went by. All this stuff that Benji probably told you in the podcast, didn't make money, didn't know. It turned into an agency. But we built that following, and we had that culture of like, they're different because of X. They show everything. They talk about analytics in gross detail. They measure relentlessly, and then they really focus on the end results, like the leads and all. And that came later, right?
What is that initial customer research if you were like, hey, you should do kind of like maybe X, maybe you should just do X, or you should do X, Y, and Z as like first steps just to kind of get that research started?
For service businesses, it's a lot more challenging, I would say.
Yeah.
And so what you have to do is go through an entire client roster, and we just on the customer interview, or the customer interviews with service businesses, so other agencies, it's go client by client, because most service businesses don't have hundreds or thousands of clients.
Yeah.
They have, and so the more detail that you can get in, the better. So we just go, what was the problem that this client had before coming to you? Do you remember the sales call? What were some of the pain points that they brought up on the sales call? What is the service that you're offering for them? How do you think it helps them? And through those series of questions, again, you'll start to see patterns in the responses in terms of what were some of the challenges people had before working with the company, how they're solving it for them. And then you can kind of back into, okay, these are certain problems that we should write about how to solve. In terms of the service offering, here are the specific strategy that we recommended to them, and you can case study how, like, the framework for that strategy, or case study how it worked for this company. And so that's kind of the thought process, is really just digging in one by one to the customers, and more than the quantitative stuff, we're looking for like the qualitative feedback, and just looking for patterns in the responses. And then that gives us an indication, okay, there's something here, and either we should focus on this topic or look for a keyword that kind of matches that.
Yeah, I think that one thing, just to even dig in there, because once you get those questions and you have like that qualitative research, and you're like, okay, I kind of have an understanding of the problems. Now, what I'm curious is like taking that to the next step of like, let's translate that into now actually a piece of content. And I know that content can take many forms, and especially the way that I've seen you do it. Some are listicles, some are interviews, some are research reports. Now, for example, just something that comes to mind is working with I'm working with someone right now who they had their e-commerce site they had like one of these like expert marketplaces for Shopify designers, and they basically just took all the basic layout and sections and just put it in and changed some colors, and we're like, yeah, there's your site, it's designed. And he was like, we got on a call, and he was like, yeah, it just doesn't feel like it's really designed. And I was just going through all of the different problems with it or whatever, and he was like, yeah. And then we started working, and I sent him an example, and he's like, this is exactly what I was looking for. I wasn't looking for this. And so I can understand the problem is, but I get that the problem there is like working with, just, expert marketplaces or something. But I'm trying to like think about digging out, maybe the requirement is to then dig in deeper and ask more questions there. But if you have a complaint like that, where would you take that? Because that seems like very, case study specific almost. It's not like I don't know how to do X with Shopify. It's more like I hired this person and they did a bad job. So like, where would you take that conversation to try and pull out some ideas?
A story?
Yeah, a story or ideas, or for creating content, something that could be valuable to then share with them.
Yeah, I might just, in that certain circumstance, I might just case study that. It's a good story. And so it's almost like, what was the problem that this person faced going into it? Maybe their mishap with this agency that tried to produce the site with them. And chances are, if that's happened to one person, it's happened to a lot of people. And so that story just becomes relatable in terms of this person trying to solve this challenge one way, realizing that was the wrong way to do things. And then you can maybe explain some of the reasons why that process failed. And then you present a better process here. So a lot of what we try to do in our content is almost every single piece, regardless of if it's a case study, a key, like something going after a keyword, is we try to think, what is like the commonly held belief around this topic, and why might that not be true? and then how can we disprove that and then back it up with evidence. And so
Okay.
you'll see that in almost every single article that we write is like, here's what you might be thinking, here's why that is wrong, or here's why that's right, and then here's our argument and then evidence to back that up.
Okay. Yeah.
And no matter what type of content it is, if it's a how-to, a case study, an opinion piece, using that sort of writing framework and thinking about what are the problems that people might be experiencing if they were trying to approach this topic. Here's how they can do things differently, and then here's why that's true. I think if you just think about content in that framework, it should help in the writing.
Yeah,
And I think
makes sense.
also that's a lot of what people are missing too is they're not setting up their blog posts like that, and they're not writing like that. And
Yeah.
I think it doesn't. I think that's part of the problem is you read something and there's no thesis behind
There's no
what you're
punchline
saying.
to the
Yeah,
joke. It's just
yeah,
like it just rambles on, and you're like, okay,
exactly.
great. But
Yeah,
like almost a blog post has to almost be persuasive in a way. Like the whole point is to try and get someone to agree with the way you view the world, and to think that you are smart because hey, I didn't know this and they just taught me this and I agree with them, and now I should probably hire them or buy their thing or whatever is kind of like part of the general idea there.
that's a perfect way to say it because so we're talking about agencies and how to go from consultant to agencies, and this has been a big learning for us recently and something that we've been thinking about a lot is if you don't have anything to say or you don't have differentiation, then it's going to be very difficult for you to um, write something unique or to stand
Yeah.
out in any way. So if you're like an agency that's just a Me Too agency, it's like, oh yeah, we do digital marketing services, paid
Yeah.
SEO, and we're for everyone. Like, what do you even write about? There's nothing unique there.
Yeah.
But if you're taking a stance and you're saying this is what we believe in as an agency, we have a unique approach or process, way of doing things, a specific customer segment that we
Yeah.
serve, then the content strategy becomes a lot easier because you have opinions that you can share, you have a unique strategy or way to approach it for certain people, and then your content starts to stand out. And for a long time, we thought that was a content problem. It's actually like a positioning problem and just like a problem in the market where you're not differentiated enough or you're not focused enough. And it
Yeah.
starts there. And if you're able to have that, then the content side becomes a lot easier. And so we found that working with agencies and services that aren't really differentiated or they're like kind of they're like copycats of someone else and they don't really have like a strong belief system behind them
Yeah.
or a unique way of approaching it, it's going to be very hard to come up with content that differentiates them or marketing alone. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that we found that's really important.
And so you kind of need to have your own philosophy around how you do your service, because I think that that's one thing where I've noticed, I mentioned this earlier, that I know I see other, in other people in the space, whether it's SEO or content marketing, essentially producing content that maybe it looks cool because they're showing big numbers and things like that. And you get this with like conversion rate optimization as well, where it's like, oh, 100% increase. And it's like, but that there wasn't 100% increase in revenue. So was it
Yeah,
really,
it's a
so it's like,
one-time lift.
yeah, exactly. And it was like, there's no real data around it. So, but I see this with like, blog traffic is such like an obvious one. Like, hey, here's the lifts in blog traffic, whereas you show conversions, and it almost it may take longer, it may be harder, and it may be less sexy, but it's like you have a very principled stance that that's what's important, and you kind of separate yourself from people by saying that. How would you say that aside from that, how do you think that you position yourself apart from other content marketing agencies?
Yeah, I mean, so the whole service, again, going back to the founding story and just all those aha moments, when I started interviewing agencies, I just questioned why they were focused on output instead of outcomes, and why no one was measuring conversions and everyone was focused on traffic.
Yeah.
You start to pick apart what doesn't make sense and then put it back together. And so that was the way that we approached our agency. So from the beginning, we never really wanted to do an agency because it's a difficult it's a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
difficult business to execute on.
Hmm.
But when basically the last course that we launched didn't really work, we came back to the idea of doing a service because we had a bunch of people when we launched the course asking us if we would just do the content marketing for them instead of
Yeah.
teach them. And so we said, okay, if we're going to do that, how would we want to do things differently? And it
Hmm.
started with asking that question. And so basically, from my personal experience trying to hire these agencies, we realized what was broken in most of these agencies. And I didn't come from the agency world, never worked in an agency before. And
Yeah.
so I think kind of coming in as a newbie and not having any
Yeah.
preconceived notions about agencies or how agencies worked, it enabled us to rethink how a content marketing agency would work from the ground up instead of just doing what everyone else is doing. And so coming into this, we said, okay, we want to focus on measuring results because no one else is doing that.
Yeah.
No other agency was willing to hold themselves accountable to a lot of times traffic or the leads part
Hmm.
at all. And the commonly held belief in the agency world or just amongst content marketers was as you grow traffic, just some percentage of that lead or
Yeah.
some percentage of that traffic will convert. And that was the most people wanted to be held accountable to. And
Hmm.
we said, okay, well, if we're servicing businesses as an agency, that argument's not really going to hold up that well. And
No.
so, like, how do you keep clients long term if like that's the way that you're measuring
Yeah.
results? And so we said, let's figure this out. And so we hired a consultant to help us figure out a lot of this GA stuff and how to measure. So that was step one. So then we have
Hmm.
a measurement focused agency. And then we asked ourselves what was wrong with a lot of the content that was produced. And we realized a lot of it was written by people without subject matter expertise. It
Yeah.
was that Google research paper method. You hire freelancers
Yeah.
and they just kind of Google around and compile something. There wasn't enough focus on what topics we should write about, and things are kind of chosen haphazardly. And so
Hmm.
basically, the process that we used was just asking the right questions. What's
Yeah.
broken about the process, and how do we fix it? And that is what differentiated us
Mm.
down the road. It was I couldn't say, and this wasn't like an aha moment all at once. It wasn't when we first started our agency that we had the right answer to everything. This was
Yeah.
a series of asking these questions and fixing one problem at a time until we felt like we built a good enough service and had a solid enough foundation to build off of
Hmm.
and enough differentiation. But it was the first question was just the results thing. Then it became the writing problem and us having to work through that ourselves and figure out what's the
Yeah.
best way to solve that problem. The promotion problem, which has been iterated a ton of times in
Yeah.
our agency. So yeah, it's a series.
Hmm.
I think the biggest learning for myself is that there is no playbook to business. There's no
Yeah.
this is how you do something. It's a series of asking questions about what's broken and how do we solve these.
Yeah.
And in every iteration, the first is about what problem we're trying to solve. Then it's like,
Hmm.
how do we hire people? It's just like it's a constant
Yeah.
evolving process like that.
And I think that you, like you said, breaking down those, what people consider to be the right way to do things. I think that you, um, I, with specific examples, one of the topics that I wanted to get into you, which kind of this rolls right into it, is talking about how you really manage client relationships with a service that requires this long-term investment, as well as some of the things that you've done that are, some people view as just downright dumb things to do, whereas like publishing your pricing pretty publicly, which I don't know if you still do, but you did. I remember looking, you had a price that said, hey, starting at $7,000 or something like that per month for this
Yeah.
service. And then also differentiating yourselves from other agencies where you're like, hey, we're going to charge you 7 grand a month where someone else might charge you 3. And instead of producing 30 pieces of content, we're going to produce 3. And so I think that you really had, when compared to the competitors, you had those like hurdles to get over. So just kind of want to just roll into that, just
Sure.
starting with the pricing and why you decided to, and maybe if you want to share like what your kind of average range of pricing is, if it's
Yeah.
still in the same area, like how you decided on that, and then why you decided to publicly display that.
Yeah. Well, it's changed a lot. So in the beginning, we charged 6K a month.
Mm-hmm.
There was no science behind it really. It was more we asked what we think a service like this would be worth if we could pull off everything that we said we could.
Yeah.
And I said 10K initially,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, well, we don't have a proven track record or case studies or anything at this point of doing it successfully. So let's charge 6K. There was no science behind it. It was just
Yeah.
a number that seemed like it wasn't too high, and that we could get clients in the door. And so basically, we just launched that on a landing page and said, this is what we're thinking of offering. This is the price. And we just tested to see if people would buy. And in the first 2 weeks, we got our first two clients.
Yeah.
Then basically, the way that we've decided to increase pricing is every time that we have more demand than we have capacity. So we have too many leads,
Mm-hmm.
price goes up.
Yeah.
So now our pricing is 8K a month, and we do a performance bonus. Well, not even a performance bonus. So basically, what happened all of last year, we had 8K a month. We
Mm-hmm.
moved to 10K a month in December,
Mm-hmm.
and then COVID hit in March.
Yeah.
And we had a 2 month period where we had no new leads. And
Mm-hmm.
we started questioning, is our price too high? Is like
Yeah.
COVID really taking an effect on business?
Mm-hmm.
And so Davish came up with the idea of we've always had pricing public on our site. So he
Mm-hmm.
he was just like, let's just remove pricing and see if pricing is the variable that is
Yeah.
keeping people from working with us. And so we did that. And instead of qualifying people on the form with our pricing publicly,
Yeah.
we just wanted to see if we could get more leads and if that was the
Mm-hmm.
limiting factor. And within like a week, I think it partially had to do with the timing. I think we did this
Yeah.
at the end of April. We took the pricing off. And
Mm-hmm.
I also think that that's when more people started just
Yeah.
thinking about services again. But our yeah, the lead volume picked up again, and so then instead of qualifying people on that initial form, we would send an email back before we got on the phone call with them,
Mm-hmm.
qualifying them and letting them know our pricing then. So now our pricing is it's 8,000 a month, and what we do is we set a goal to basically break even on the
Mm-hmm.
engagement. So how many leads per month would we, or how many signups would we need per month to break even on the cost of our engagement? And once we
Mm-hmm.
hit that goal, then we move to 10K, and that's it, the pricing will never go up from there.
Okay.
Um, so
Yeah.
that so basically, we do think 10K is the value of our service, but we're willing to operate at 8K until basically we hit the same goal that the company wants, which is
Yeah.
to break even, and then we'll move together, thinking that the value of our service will keep going up over time.
Yeah. How long does it typically take to get to that, to make that jump? Have you I know it varies like
It just
all the
started.
time. Oh, it just
So
started. Okay.
that
Yeah.
that pricing model just started, but I can tell you historically, we've always measured the break even.
Yeah.
It's just so dependent on the business. So
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we qualify people for upfront before even working with them. So I can tell you, like, not good fit businesses, low priced e-commerce.
Yeah.
Why? Because like the volume would need to be so high for you to ever break even on the cost of our engagement.
Yeah.
Um, like, yeah, so like typically what we look for is high price services are great because it's
Mm-hmm.
like one or two deals. It pays for the cost of our service. Like the cognitive FX case study, I think month 5 or 6, they
Mm-hmm.
were started to be profitable on our engagement. Um, B2B can fluctuate. It can be 3 months to a year, depending on the
Yeah.
business. It's usually somewhere in the first year. It
Yeah.
is,
And
and usually it's like month 3, you'll start to see conversions come in and see that we're
mm-hmm.
headed in the right trajectory. But it's really till about like months 9 through 12 where you really start to see the traction pick up.
Yeah. And do you think that you would have been able to um, really just out front start selling the service that you're selling when it compares to other people without having built up the brand kind of equity and grow and convert in your skill set and Devesh's? Like, earlier on? Like, would you have been able to sell the, because like thinking about the service, I don't know if you've changed how you provide it, but originally it was like maybe three posts per month, which was incredibly, and you were still so focused on the value that you were bringing in and like the conversions, etc. So it was like, hey, we're getting you the results, this is what we're going to produce, and so that's all that matters. But I think in a lot of people's minds it's like, oh, they're going to do 20 and you're going to do 3. Do you think that you could have sold that difference without that brand equity?
I don't know if it was as much about the brand as it was proving the value in the results that we were showing publicly. I think that's what sells it, is when maybe people see one case study and don't really believe it, but when you start to see multiple case studies showing the results that we're driving in, that's what really builds the trust and the confidence enough to just be like, I trust these people to do this.
Yeah.
I think in content marketing, especially, I think people want this type of service. They want to be able to just hand it off and trust someone and not have to think about it.
Yeah.
But there's not too many business or agencies or services like this in my mind that can do that for people.
Yeah.
So I think that is why the whole concept of the done for you resonated with people. And I think other people tried to copy that language or even just kind of the service offering, and it falls flat because you're not able to fulfill on the promise. So the promise and the like the backing of the claim is all coming from the case studies and us writing fully transparently and sharing all these numbers publicly. And I think that is what allows us to charge a high price. And yeah, we still do 3 articles a month. And our philosophy is, we created this system that we think is the best system out there. So it consists of the customer research, doing all the ideation, writing the articles with interviewing subject matters, promoting the articles, and the conversion aspect. We truly do believe this, that we can outperform the high volume game because you're following all the pieces of the process instead of like missing one piece of it. And so if you're just focusing on volume, but your strategy isn't there, or you're just focusing on volume, but you have no promotion mechanism, like you're not going to get the same results. And so the positioning difference is in the way that we sell this on sales calls, is we say, the cost of our service is equal or less than the cost of a full-time US hire doing content marketing, except we can do more than a single person can, and we can typically outperform them.
Yeah.
And so that shifts the mindset from just straight deliverables to what is the value that I'm going to receive from the service. And when you think about, we're doing the customer research, we're producing all these articles, and it's not as simple as just Googling around. We're actually conducting interviews. There's multiple editing rounds that go through. Paid promotion comes out of our own budget. So like, is someone going to pay to promote content out of their salary? Like when you start talking about it this way, it kind of changes the perception of what the service is, and it takes the focus away from each individual article and what I'm paying per article to like, what am I getting in return? And so every conversation, the conversation is focused on what's the payback period, same like any other channel that you would be in a startup or company, of this entire channel, instead of focusing on how much is this article going to cost, like how much are you spending on promotion. It's not about any single piece of the puzzle. It's about the entire system working cohesively together.
And because it can take, like you said, sometimes to reach that break-even point, and of course it's not even like, it's not like, hey, your service isn't valuable until you hit the break-even point, because once you leave, the articles are still, the idea is you're still going to be generating leads and the value is still going to be there even when you're not providing the service. But I think there's some idea, some aspect of selling a service that requires that long-term buy-in. There's a lot of different ways that people work, do this. They sometimes they'll do 3 to 6 month contracts, 6 months to a year. Sometimes they'll just do, month over month. How do you think about it? And how do you bill in that way, contracts or not? And why did you choose to go down that path?
Yeah, we do month to month. And again, I think this kind of I don't know. We've had a lot of people tell us we're dumb for doing it this way, but I think it goes back to what we believe in. I never believed in locking someone into an on like a long-term contract because one, if you're not happy with the service, like you're just going to be pissed that you're paying that money every month and you're not happy
Yeah.
with it. And then that also leads to bad word of mouth because someone's paying for a service that they're not happy with and telling their
Hmm.
friends how horrible it is.
Yeah.
So, so like that never really made sense to me. Two, I think you should have to prove the value of your service every month.
Hmm.
And so we're constantly challenging ourselves to beat the results that we had the previous month.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's how we're showing continued traction. And so I think this model works for us because we're transparent in all the results that we're sharing. So every single
Hmm.
client gets a live dashboard where they can see the traffic month over month. They can see the leads at any point in time. And typically the way agencies run is you have to wait for a monthly reporting call or you have to
Yeah.
ask for them to get it. And like the clients have a live view into everything. And then on the call every month, if let's say results are down, most people try to hide that kind of stuff. We just dig
Yeah.
into it and say, here's why things are down, or here's why things might not be performing as well as we think they
Hmm.
should, and here's what we're gonna do to improve it. So I
Yeah.
think it's just I feel like the agency world, from having managed other agencies and interacted with other agencies, just tries to like hide things and
Yeah.
they're just not really transparent. And so it was just changing the mindset of like, let's just be as transparent as possible. Let's share everything and let's just be honest. And we think that will in turn drive business. And that's
Yeah.
really all it is. It's not any secret science, but it's just that's why we choose the month to month thing because
Hmm.
like yeah, I don't know. That's just what we believe in.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to. I mean, you want to. Essentially, you're putting it on yourself to just prove to them every month that, or at least you're on the trajectory to success. You can keep them around. Not like, hey, I don't think this is working. I want to cancel, and then them being in a 6 month contract. That doesn't sound like a fun conversation.
Yeah, and at the
Um,
beginning, again, we level set with them on in terms of get all their numbers, what are their
hmm.
goals, what do we need to hit to break even, and we share that chart every single month on the call and say, here's where we're at relative to the goal. So if we're always moving towards that goal, there's really
Hmm.
even if it's taking longer, it's still showing a positive trend. And so I
Yeah.
think that's also what enables us to do that.
So I think one of the things that as we've got about 10 minutes left here, or so that I wanted to dive into is really just you provide this really high level of service that requires you be on the ball every single month and prove your worth. And in this industry and doing content marketing and marketing in general, proving your worth is just an ongoing battle with how things change. And so at the same time, while you've been doing that, you've been able to do a bit of traveling. You've been able to kind of move around a little bit. You're completely remote. So I'm just kind of interested in like how you're operating things. So from like a team perspective, like what does your team look like? And I guess we'll just start there.
Oh, there's so many different ways I can take that question. Philosophy wise, I think having been in startups and more corporate companies, I just thought the way that most businesses operated didn't make a lot of sense. So you go to
Mm-hmm.
work for 8 hours a day. Most people are working like truly like a few hours a day, and then
Yeah.
they're spending like 5 hours a day pretending like they're working.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this makes no sense either. So when we started the company, one, we wanted to be remote. Two, there is a philosophy around it doesn't matter about how much you work, it's just what
Mm-hmm.
you get done. And so that's literally it. So tools that we have, Trello is like our content calendar, and that's like our
Yeah.
project management system, and everything is visible in there. Every single um, piece of content that we produce, you can see where it's at any point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Slack is the tool that we use to communicate with the team,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no hours. I don't. There's no like checking in where someone's at for the day. If
Yeah.
they're just off, they're off. And so the good thing about our service is because it's a productized service, it's very predictable in terms of the deliverables that we need to give to the client every month.
Mm-hmm.
There's very clear timing, and so we just leave it up to everyone on our team to just get their work done. Everyone knows exactly what needs to get done. And it's like, you can do it at 8 p.m. or 6 a.m. if you want. And it doesn't really matter to us as long as things get done. So I think that enables the team to kind of just create their own schedules, including me, and travel, because really the only thing that's set on the schedule is just meetings with clients, which for a lot of the team is less often than it is for me, because we do sales calls too. So that's something that we have to be present for. But yeah, most of the people on the team, it's a very, very flexible work schedule. In terms of the progression of people on our team, every single person that works for us besides our project manager started as a writer. That came from testing out a bunch of things and kind of ending up with this system that works.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people would think, oh, like a content strategist, or like maybe you want someone more with a marketing background. What we figured out is that it's really, really, really difficult to teach someone how to write.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to teach someone how to do marketing than it is to teach someone writing skills. And so what we test for first is that they have the writing skills. So every single person starts as just a freelance writer.
Yeah.
We do test articles to see how good they are. And then if they succeed, then they typically write maybe 1 or 2 pieces for one account, start taking up more of those, and then maybe write for a couple different accounts to see if they can write the same quality across different types of businesses.
Yeah.
And then if they can do those things well, then there's an opportunity to move to a strategist, which means that they can now manage an account. They get a lot more involved on the strategy side in terms of working with us to come up with keywords and topics, and they do a lot of the client management and reporting. And basically those are the only 2 roles in the company. Oh, as well as editors. And so also we do peer editing. So writers can edit each other's pieces, and that helps build collaboration amongst the team and give feedback amongst the team too. So those are really the only roles that we have.
Yeah. And you pay your writers. I mean, like, what's funny is even when I was, like I mentioned doing the content marketing thing, or doing my old position, reading your articles, you were like, you pay writers. I think that initial article you said you were charging like $350 an article. I don't know if that's changed or gone up or down now, but is that still like somewhat the range based on for like a post?
Yeah. So all the writers and strategists can make as much money or optimize for their lifestyle as much as they want. So that was a core principle too, is just, I think the common business is like, give someone a salary and that's as much as they can make until you give them a raise.
And then force them to do as much work as you want them to do.
Exactly. And then it's like pile as many accounts on them as possible. We didn't think that was fair or the right way to incentivize people too. And so like a strategist gets paid per account. So there's like an account fee. Then they can choose to write as many articles as they want for their accounts, so they can make as much money as writing, or delegate it to other writers. And then if they delegate it, then they make a fee for editing that person's article, so they can basically optimize their workload to what they want and what their skill set is best for. So for me, I would be a really slow writer for other people, but I'm very quick on the strategy side. And so I would want to take as many clients from a strategy perspective and make my money that way, and then delegate the writing to other people, and then just edit basically. And so you can kind of optimize your workload and your lifestyle based on what works for you and make as much money as you want. Or like some people on our team, they don't really care as much about the money and they want more time in their lives. And so they can take as many accounts as they want, or write as many pieces, or edit as many pieces as they want. I think this whole idea around remote and we kind of like stumbled into all these things. We just had certain principles that we wanted to live by in terms of like the business that we wanted to create for ourselves, in terms of like having a lifestyle business, something that everyone was happy doing. They were all making a good wage for wherever they lived. And try to have it be as fair as possible, where everyone has the same incentive system and no one's making more money doing the same work than someone else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's kind of like a new, it goes almost into, it's not just the work from home idea and everybody can work remotely, but actually taking it a step further and like, what does that actually mean for people? Um, and yeah, no, I think that that's really awesome. I think, there's really, we're coming down to the end of our time here. I just want to ask you like two more questions here. Um,
Sure.
one, actually, really just one question to end it off. So, as someone, starting a service-based business or starting an agency, what is your this is super broad. You can take it anywhere you like, any way you like. But what is your number one tip or piece of advice that you would give to someone in my position starting a new agency that's going to start working with clients and charging? What would be your number one tip or piece of advice that you think that they should take on or think about?
Um, Create a service around something that you're really skilled at. And so
Hmm.
don't try to like learn something new while on the job. I think that's kind
Yeah.
of a like recipe for failure because of all the things that I had said earlier, because you really have to know, like, let's say you're doing paid advertising or something like that, and you've never done paid advertising and you're
Hmm.
trying to create a business on top of that. You have to learn two different things. You have to learn
Yeah.
starting a business and that skill set. If you have a skill set that you can offer to people, then you just have to figure out the business part, and you already have the knowledge around what are some of the common failures and things that people do wrong, and maybe
Hmm.
where you're skilled at. And so you want to figure out how you can play into your strengths. And so what differentiates your skill set from everyone else that's doing the same thing? I
Hmm.
would say that's what's really important for you to ask yourself those questions. So I can tell you for us, it was there was a lot of content marketing advice for like solopreneurs and people blogging for themselves, and there
Hmm.
wasn't a lot of this information about doing content marketing for a business that wasn't a blog. It was like
Hmm.
there's some separate product or an agency, and I need to get leads for that. That
Yeah.
was the hole that we tried to fill. And it
Hmm.
was because I had that skill set of doing this inside of those companies to where
Yeah.
I wanted to play into my strengths and not try to do content marketing for like e-commerce or something that I've never done before. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just get specific. And so serve a specific audience, because I think that also gives you a competitive advantage against all the other people you're competing against, and it speaks to the customer succinctly. So like when we started, we said content marketing for B2B businesses, and then even more specifically, the types of businesses that we can help. Start there, and you can always broaden out down the road. So we just
Hmm.
published something on B2C content marketing. We took our first B2C client last year, realized that we had a lot of success with that. And now we're starting to expand into that area.
Hmm.
But I think if we said content marketing for everyone in the very beginning,
Yeah.
it would have spoken to no one, and we wouldn't have built the clout that we did in the very beginning. And so I think
Yeah.
those are probably the two most important lessons: is just focus on what you're good at, figure out what about your skill set is different from everyone else, dig into that, and get very specific in terms of the audience you can choose.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Thank you. Where, I want to plug your stuff and we'll put, links to everything for this. Where can people learn more about you, find you, connect with you, etc.?
Yeah, Twitter is probably my most active channel. I'm
Okay.
on there every day. In terms of just strategy stuff, all our blog shares all of our case studies and our process and that kind of stuff. And if people wanted to dig in even more than that, we just launched a new course like a month ago, and that really goes way deeper than anything that you see on our blog. And we answer
Hmm.
people's questions on there, and yeah, us like help them with their strategy and stuff like that. So that would probably be the way that
Okay.
someone can connect with us the most if they
And
want to do that.
and that's just growingconvert.com, right?
Yeah, growandconvert.com is our website. You'll find all our blog, and then the top right corner, you can find the course and all the information about that.